This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod with Alex Beck. Alex is a startup co-founder. He's also into biz dev, UX, 0 to 1 type of guy. B2B SaaS is one of my favorite topics, so we're going to talk about that today. Co-founder at Clara, founded a bunch of other startups, has been in an accelerator. So all topics that are very dear to me. Gonna have fun today. This pod is presented to you by podfire.com. If you want to start your own podcast, if you want to scale the unconventional way and monetize, you can go to podfire.com. Alex, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and about Clara.
Hey, thanks, Charles. Yeah, so Clara is kind of a mistake in some ways. We didn't intend on starting this. It was really sort of a large group of enterprise customers came to us, or prospective clients came to us to build this thing. Initially visualizing ecosystems, and honestly, me and my business partner were not certain that it was the thing to do. But there was quite a lot of money on the table, and we did some proof of concepts, basically mapping out ecosystems of companies for consulting firms. That kept growing, and we started to see a lot of organic traction and people wanting to do various different things with it. And then that sort of led us to Clara today, which is the ability to take a spreadsheet, a CSV, a CRM, and turn it into a full app. So we've got people using the same visualization front end, but the powerful back end as well to do all sorts of different things, whether it be publicly or privately. So the tool is kind of like a front end. If you think of Airtable as sort of being the back end of a lot of apps, we're sort of the front end version of that with a lot more robust user types. And so we've got companies using it internally to manage internal innovation projects, ideas, and innovation systems, kind of workflows that they were using Excel for. And we've got other companies using it to promote their members or their ecosystem. But essentially any Excel data, any CRM data, kind of any tabular data can be mapped and made into a sort of a Clara app, as it were.
How did you get there? You ran an accelerator, you tested a bunch of ideas before. Why do you feel there's a strong product market fit there?
Yeah, so we built some things through Accelerator, and obviously through Accelerators built a lot of relationships. And I guess one of the things that a lot of founders do is have an idea and try and stress test that and build something based on a concept they come up with, which is how we started. Now that obviously is great because you're really married to that, and you need the passion that you have in order to really put in the yards to get there. But a lot of the time that's not enough in terms of product, problem solution fit or product market fit. So a lot of these relationships we built again came to us with concepts, or a concept, basically Clara, this visualization tool. And so we lent into what the market was telling us in essence, rather than what we necessarily wanted to do. So as I said, there was a lot of pushback from us initially because we thought, especially with the first use case, kind of ecosystem mapping, this isn't a market that's big enough for us to build a business around. But when we started to see different people with quite different use cases come to us with their spreadsheets, because ultimately there's a billion users of Excel. There's so many different things you can be doing here. And again, it boils back down to like data management and communicating that data. So obviously the visualization is the communication side. The data management is kind of the power of the app itself that we take from the Excel to build this app, which is, for example, one of the problems our users had were, we have the spreadsheet, we want to share it across the organization. It's 500 rows of data, but each row is maybe assigned to someone. So rows 1 to 10, John owns those. Row 11 is Sarah, row 12 is Peter, and so on and so forth. Now, John's rows 1 to 10, he should be able to do and see everything in every single column. But he shouldn't be able to see rows 11 onwards. Or not all of it at least. He shouldn't be able to see the funding information. He shouldn't be able to edit that data. And that was exactly the problem that Generali had, basically, that they had these Excel sheets that they were using to manage these processes and these workflows, and there was hours of time kind of like stitching them back together, making sure they had the most current information, redacting information because they didn't want certain people to see things. With our system, you don't have to do that. You can just be like, okay, 1 to 10 assigned to this user. This role can see all the data. The viewer role for the organization can only see, only a few of those columns, not all of them, and can't edit them. So we've built a much more robust user system kind of in the back end of this. So it's taken the power of Excel and built a system on top of it. You can always go back to Excel. You can always edit things and pull things back in from places, but that allows you to have a lot more users generating content in the framework of an Excel sheet or a CSV, doing different things, and it also gives you a full set of analytics, right? So you can see when people are interacting with the data on an Excel versus an Excel, and obviously it's also a more intuitive way to deal with data when I guess you've got multiple Excel sheets referencing each other. So in their case also that have sheets referencing sheets, which you'd have to like jump back and forth with to figure out like who was connected to what project, what were the bottlenecks within certain projects, those sorts of things. So it allows you to obviously understand all that data in a much more intuitive way, because we humans understand the world as objects and relationships. You'll see a tree outside, it's above your car. Now that's the way that when we visualize data, that's how it looks as well. But when you've got that in a spreadsheet, obviously those are rows that referencing each other in two different sheets. It's very hard to understand. So we really got there from people coming to us without us having very much on the table at this point and being like, this is our problem, this is what we need. Can you help us get there? Rather than us going out to companies and saying, hey, we think you have this problem, we've talked to you about it before, and we've built a solution already. So it was quite a different way of product development and building a startup.
How much are you retailing for? What would be the price to use your platform, and who's your ideal customer persona?
Yeah, so it's a bit it's tiered basically, and so we've got a freemium tier naturally as well. At the moment, the lowest ticket for us is about 100 euros a month, and the highest is about 2,500 per month. Usually we bill that on a quarterly or annual basis, and that's based on features and level of white labeling basically. So we don't price on users at the moment, nor will we, I don't think. As we're moving into this year, there's some lower tier pricing that we know that we can move into. There's some SMEs that don't quite have that kind of budget, and that we can give some in between freemium and the 100. There's some areas where we can add some features or add some functionality that will speak to that SME unit. And then obviously on the higher end as well, we know that there's enterprises that again require a little bit more maturity from the product, that can pay more. Our ideal customer profile at the moment, there's usually people in somewhere between strategy and data. So each different user group we have has a different use case, but they usually have strategy somehow in their title, and they're managing data. Those are the two commonalities. So for example, for the Generali use case, that would be someone who is connected to central innovation and is managing innovation projects. That's the data side, and the strategy part is that I guess the management part is connected to that as well. So that profile would be innovation activation manager, innovation manager, innovation portfolio owner. Those are the sorts of roles for the Generali type tool. Whereas we have other users doing slightly different things. Again, going back to strategy and data. For example, we work with the New Zealand tech ecosystem, and the role there is actually, I guess, project management CEO. Again, a lot of what they're doing is managing data. In this case, they're managing their portfolio of users, of members, and promoting their member services. So each different use case we have is essentially productized, and we have a different kind of profile buyer. They're similar, of course, but the role is different based on the industry. The first one is very much large enterprise. So, and we're talking about financial services in this case because that's the area we know. So, insurance companies and banks essentially at this stage. And then the New Zealand tech profile is again very clearly segmented. We're talking about membership organizations, specifically tech membership organizations. Those are two relatively small markets in terms of number of customers, but obviously the revenue's there. Those are two of many different product lines that we can offer. But again, it always goes back to our clients always have an Excel sheet, an Airtable, a Google sheet, a CSV, or tabular data in some form. and yeah, and they're in some way trying to communicate that data with many different stakeholders.
I saw on your LinkedIn, you're an advocate for the environment. I often see, these posts about electric cars not being so good for the environment, or I don't know, giving up meat, for example. But what is the footprint of the finance industry? I feel it's like looking at mines and selling toothpicks or jeans to miners. I feel that the finance industry is fueling this whole thing. So how could the finance industry be greener, quote unquote?
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting application of our technology as well, right? I mean, we can, for example, map out an entire supply chain. That's a use case we have. So if we're looking at specifically financial services, we can map out portfolios. Here's a large part of your loans portfolio or your insurance book or whatever else it is that are connected to very unsustainable or non-green assets. So, or here's even going one step further, here's part of your loan book that are connected to maybe other industries that are very connected to that industry as well. So a step further, that data obviously is relatively accessible in many cases. There's no secrets that certain organizations spend more money on oil or are buying more fossil fuel or are investing in that. So we can map that out if there's demand internally to do so, or on the other side, work with organizations to make those mappings as a way to call out companies that are really financing and putting money into those industries. The question really is always like, how can you avoid doing this that's for just greenwashing reasons? It's definitely an interesting area that we can visualize this, because essentially the first view or the first visualization we have is a relationship view. So it really is, hey, this company is connected to this company in some fashion. In this case, we can be like, this bank has financed BP for this many years, or has financed R&D for a company that is, building drilling technology that's obviously their aim is to be in business for still many years. So we can map those relationships in a very clear way to understand. In fact, we did a map during the beginning of the Ukraine-Russia war. We mapped out all of the organizations that had left Russia and all the organizations that had stayed there as a way to sort of understand and put pressure on organizations that weren't willing to leave Russia or hadn't yet. We can do the same thing with financing of fossil fuel and the green energy transition. It's really a question of working with a partner who can get that in front of the right eyeballs, right? We can do these things sometimes, but we don't have as much reach as large consulting firms or banks or anyone who would want to do this. It's definitely an interesting area, and it's definitely a way that we can use our tool as well to kind of call attention to that. It's a matter of finding a partner that has reach.
So I sometimes wish I would know like where the money of my clients would come from if I knew that, I don't know, they obtained it by doing unethical stuff. Maybe I wouldn't accept it. Is that the future of money, in which you could see like every single dollars that you're being paid, you can see where they're from, and you can potentially refuse to do business? So people would actually have money, but no one would actually take their money because they're full of shit. What do you think of that future?
It's an interesting question. And I mean, I think there was a lot of cryptos and a lot of different incentives or like areas in the blockchain space that were more or less trying to do that by building the entire system, right? The entire stack, the invoicing, the smart contracts, the payments. But obviously, a lot of people are still never going to use crypto as a means of payment and acceptance. So we're stuck in the rails of the old world. So from that perspective, we can't rebuild the way that necessarily payments work and tracking those payments all in one flow. So doing that in a world where we're still probably going to be dealing in fiat currency means, how do we track that currently? There'll be the bigger the client that you're working with, the more likely it is you'll be able to figure out where they make their money from. And so from that perspective, I think there could be a transparency registry. In fact, the German government has been building a transparency registry for ownership of companies. So if there were regulatory bodies that were interested in transparency registries for companies in terms of where they made their money, initially first industries, and then going past that and saying, okay, where are they invoicing? This company here, this SME is invoicing a lot to it's Switzerland or Panama. Why is that happening? Who are those companies? And building slowly a transparency registry for also tax reasons. If you could get the European Union to agree on regulation like that, then again, I think that would be a really fantastic tool for everybody to be able to like, okay, we actually don't want to work with this company because, you know, X amount of their profits or X amount of their revenues coming from this area. Without any kind of regulation, I think it would be near impossible to get that data at a meaningful level. You can certainly still get some of that information. So it would be the transparency registry without regulation would be, okay, we're working with these very large clients. You could look at, you know, professional services firms, consulting firms, financial services, as you mentioned. And you could have some understanding of maybe 20% of where the revenue comes from, looking at reports, looking at investigative journalism and things, and build a smaller version of this transparency registry. But without meaningful regulation, a lot of that data is obviously still going to be hidden, and there's no way that all these organizations are going to provide where all their revenue comes from. Also, strategically, it doesn't make sense unless it's a regulatory requirement and there's a compliance component to it. But again, if the EU was to move on something like that, which I think would be amazing and would get us towards also or away from these ideas of tax havens, because, you know, companies could be shamed for that. Absolutely, this is an application of we could do this, other people could do this, of course, as well, but it's something that our tool could do very naturally. I just wouldn't hold my breath until there's a solid framework of regulation in the European Union.
What are your top goals for this year? What do you want to achieve?
So we're raising a round at the moment. We're about 2/3 committed. So obviously finishing the round in the next few months. We have built the tool initially there was quite a heavy service aspect in the fact that we needed to onboard our users, and that has been a bottleneck for us. So one of the biggest things for us this year is to build the page builder, we're calling it, the ability for you to come to the platform, import data from a number of different places. Not everyone has data sitting in an Excel sheet or on Salesforce. So there's a lot of different integrations that we need to build after this raise. That's one of the reasons we're raising the money. And then build the ability for you to be able to set up the entire app from your data set and also then have it sync. That's kind of our crucial goal for this year. We've had so many inbound requests to use the tool via the tool itself, and then also via email and then referral, that we've just not been able to handle, just because there's an onboarding component, and also some of our users have the preference of being able to run imports whenever they want because their data is constantly changing. So there's some maturity we need to gain there. We've managed to make it to break even, and with that, we're now trying to raise this money to be able to basically have our users do the whole import themselves, the whole onboarding themselves. Past that, there's a couple of other views we want to add, visualizations on top of the app builder. So we've got a couple things there in terms of expanding contracts with current clients. So having a geo view, for example, so going back to the example of what we were speaking about before, if you were looking to map out your clients and their clients, you could actually map out where they were buying products from or supply chain from, looking at a map actually geographically, and seeing kind of the flows of information from one country to another. So those are the main things for us this year, is expanding the ability for our users to onboard themselves, and that will just widen the net in terms of the number of people we can onboard, and we can get to that inflection point in terms of revenue, because we're not a bottleneck anymore.
Where can people find out more about you, Alex?
Best place is probably LinkedIn, or obviously our website, clarafinds.com. There's a space there to request a map, and there's a link to all of our public repositories, as it were, depots. Much like Airtable, our tool has a lot of people using it entirely publicly, and then some people using it entirely privately. But there's a lot of public things going on there, so you can see what other people are doing and request to set up a map at clarafinds.com.